All right, welcome to this Forward Thinking podcast. This is Rick Mejia.
Alexandra Joseph, your clinical director.
And today's, guys, we have a really cool podcast. We're going to talk about sex, beauty, and love and how it all relates to our health. Okay?
And this is honor of Valentine's Day, which is tomorrow.
It's honor of Valentine's Day, which is tomorrow. So when you guys hear this perspective on how is it that in Forward Thinking we see sex, love, beauty, and how we kind of look at it from a different, angle and a different point of view, is going to make a lot of sense to your life and how you view things. And why is it important that we try to optimize our health so those emotional triggers like sex, like love, and like beauty become more present in your life in a more natural way?
Yes. Well, I think there's so many different layers to that topic that you're going to be discussing, Rick, today. And the reason why is because when you look at it right now, the way we view it and the way it's presented to us on different social media platforms, it's so superficial. Sex, love, and beauty, very superficial.
Correct.
And it's much deeper than that. Much deeper than. And I think this is where a lot of us today are suffering from that lack of, fulfillment, finding that love that we desire because we are so trying to emulate or pretend or become something like we see.
Absolutely. I think, of course, like you just said, social media, media itself has created a certain, they call it a social construct, right? Where everybody has to be sort of perfect all the time.
The
but they forget about
expectations.
themselves.
Right.
But the angle I want to have this conversation about is why is it that we see sex, beauty, and love from that perspective? Why is it so important for us as social creatures to have those three pillars of life so optimized? Does that make sense? And the reason I'm saying this is because we first have to understand that we are biological beings.
Yes.
That means as human beings, we have necessities, survival necessities that are wired in our bodies, in our brain, and in our DNA. And these are survival mechanisms to be able to live longer, to pass off offspring, to be able to survive. Okay?
Right. And if you think about it, just from the beginning, right? You're born, you are created inside, you're created by an egg and a sperm, right? Those two things come together. So there's a relationship, there's a mating that happens. Now, that child that grows inside that mom is there for approximately a year, even though it's 9 months, but they say approximately a year. That child bonds with that mother. So innately, if you think about it, you're taught before you even know it about bonding, about being cared for, about being safe, being, cherished. So it's part of our DNA.
It's part of our like you say, our DNA. We're wired to want to love something, to want to care for something. And the reason love is so powerful, it's because it is the way the mother takes care of you so you can move on and live on and reproduce. And
what love gives you is safety, it's comfort, it's confidence. All right. So without that, and when we see children that do not have that, they're broken, they're maladjusted, very difficult for them to connect with people, very difficult for them to, succeed in life.
Absolutely. I mean, the love, not only from your mother, but the love from people creates such a powerful neurochemical reaction, biochemical reaction that it's necessary. I've heard a couple of, I guess you would say, I've seen a couple of news articles where I don't know if it's true, but maybe you know more about it. That certain for babies, if they don't, when they're born, if then they don't get the hug from their mother or their
the kangaroo pouch type of syndrome.
If they don't get the love from their mom,
being on top of their mom,
actually die, right?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Even like in adults, you're with someone for many years, you love them deeply, and then they pass away. So you think about someone who's been married for over 50 years, and then that loved one that passes away, and then you hear that person then passes away, and they say broken heart syndrome.
Wow. And I think part of it, and when they study longevity, is the neurochemicals that are produced, the biochemistry that is produced by love it's like an anti-aging chemical in a way.
Exactly. So we are chemical beings. We're full of hormones, and these hormones are chemical messengers, and they communicate with each other. So it's not just from a physical standpoint, strength, and be able to have children, but it's also from a mental stability standpoint. Um, Love in itself, it's a very powerful and deep emotion.
Absolutely.
It's one that cannot be bottled. It's one that
Absolutely.
has to be, there has to be interaction. There has to be some sort of chemistry that happens.
Absolutely. And the reason we're saying this, guys, is because a lot of that has been manipulated. And that's what you said about the media. Media has and social media has created the perception of love, the perception of beauty, the perception of what
I,
a healthy sex life should be. But the problem with that perception is that it is overstimulated and is not real. And then that's when depression and all the side effects of that come into place. But the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you, like we just said, love is it's something that we're wired to have. Without love, we will not survive, right? And as a biological being, you beauty and sex is the same thing.
right. I have this thing I say all the time. I call it the princess and prince charming syndrome. We see Walt Disney, we see all these kind of things, and we grow up looking for that perfect prince, and we're going to get married and run off into the sunset. Well, again, we're stuck with this perception, and we try to build our life on this. And then when we realize that that is not the perception, that is not reality, there's more to this than that. This is something that you have to not only work on it in the sense of mentally and being healthy. And so being healthy mentally is as important as the physical aspect. So it has to start with the physical aspect. If you're not healthy physically, you cannot be healthy mentally in order to love, in order to have great sex, or in order to be beautiful.
Well, I think what you're also saying is before you love someone else well, you have to love yourself first. So guys,
Right.
how do you love how can you actually love someone else if you don't love yourself?
Exactly. And you cannot expect someone to love you for you. You understand what I'm
Exactly.
saying? So sometimes we get in this sense like, oh, I need him to love me. So in order for me to feel love, you'll never feel love because he can never love you, or anyone can never love you to that extent.
Absolutely. I mean, love is, but the for the points that we're communicating here is love is a crucial part of longevity.
Oh, yes, it is a very crucial.
Community is a big
It
part of.
helps, it releases all these great hormones and chemical messengers in our brains.
Oxytocin, which is considered the love
Hormone.
hormone. It is a
Yes.
hormone that, let's say you grab your dog or your cat and you hug it, you release a bunch of oxytocin.
Exactly. We know that by people who have high blood pressure, by stroking their dog, it actually relaxes and then brings down their pressures. It makes them more relaxed. People who are very stressful, sometimes they'll tell them, get a dog, get a pet to help them, be less stressful.
Oxytocin is also produced when you hug someone. There's a study that shows that if you hug someone for more than like 5 to 7 seconds or something like that, your production of oxytocin increases, which then decreases, like you say, your blood pressure. It makes you feel much better. But this is why love has become this neurochemical and biochemical necessity.
Yes, they've even shown in studies where people who are hugging, touching, how our cells react to it. They light up. That's, I mean, the most simplest way for me to put it is that they light up when we hug and touch. So it's a form of growth. Another way for me to put it is when we look at as we get older. If you take an elderly person and you put them in a nursing home and no one visits them, they'll die. They learn to start having dementia. You find them contracted. They're no longer moving. They forget how to talk, because this is how important love is: to touch, to talk, to hug, to let the person know that you actually care about them.
Absolutely. So it's interesting, guys, how we're talking about love, not just from the social construct or how we see it and pursue how we psychologically see love, but how the physiology of love is really, really, really important.
Oh,
I
it's
mean, the other day I was like you said, they were talking about the power of serotonin in love, and how if you are low in serotonin, you tend to put yourself down and crunch down and not
Yeah.
want to move forward, and you sort
It's
of
just
feel.
it's a form of depression. This is why some of us end up on serotonin uptake inhibitors. These help us because our serotonin is so low. Um,
And funny, don't you think it's funny that that's what social media has done? This is what social media has done that's been so great. They understand that we're so biological beings that as long as they show us sex, love, and beauty, we're addicted. So this is why every single day when we're looking at social media, we are addicted, because as a biological being, that's all you're looking for all the time.
and
If you can eat and you can have sex and you can have love, you're the perfect human being. Doesn't
that's true because I think we're becoming numb. We're actually becoming
We're
numb.
overstimulated. We're
Yes.
overstimulated. So, guys, one of the things that I want to explain to you guys with Alex about love is real love is a real connection. Is when you love yourself first, you then find someone that you connect with, and you can share that love, right? But at the same time, there's toxic love out there. There's toxicity where it's perceived as love and is not actual love, right? And what we have to understand that as good love can be for someone, toxic love can be the opposite. It could be like you die much faster too. You know what I mean?
That's why it's very important that the relationships that you keep. Now, we've been talking, many of you might be thinking we're talking from love from a male and female perspective. Remember that love comes your families, your child, your friends.
Your dog.
Those are just as important, because you can be in a loving relationship with your husband or wife, but you didn't have a great relationship with your parents, which makes you dysfunctional, and where you cannot, your relationship with your spouse or significant other becomes it becomes stagnant or has issues, but those issues stem from the lack of love you felt someplace else.
Absolutely.
So these things kind of wire us to how we end up loving each other. So what I'm saying here, relationships that you keep are very important in how that love grows. That's why there's certain relationships when you're in them and they're toxic, you need to leave them because they're going to wire you to a certain way.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the main things that Jordan Peterson, which is one of my favorites intellectuals and psychologists, explains is in all these years of studying clients in his clinical practice, he never quite understood why it was so hard for some clients to go through periods of times of breakups, of being, I wouldn't say the word cheated, but being what's the word that I can use there? Lied to. It seems like the opposite of love is when someone doesn't value you, when someone doesn't care for you, and he always wondered why, as humans, that hurts us so much. And that gives you the power of why love is so powerful, because the opposite of that is so painful.
I always tell people this is one of the things I always say, love breeds hate. You cannot hate what you don't love. You have to love it in order to hate it, because if you didn't love it, you wouldn't care.
Absolutely.
So that's where I think that comes from. And
the other thing that's really important to note about love, guys, is there's absolutely no drug and there's absolutely no way to ever replace the feeling of falling in love. So one of the things that, like, you can never tell a mother, can you reproduce the feeling you felt when you first saw your child? Or someone that they first fall in love. The chemical reaction is so powerful
and so deep
that you can never really reproduce that. Right?
In fact, this is why we constantly date, because we're always chasing that high.
Exactly.
We're always chasing that high. And this is sometimes where we find infidelity in certain relationships, because maybe that person had that relationship and for some reason or other, it didn't work out, but they want that same high and they're always looking for it.
I love the fact that you just said that, because that's the topic itself. Why sex, beauty, and love are so important to our health, and why we need to understand that as biological beings. Because like you just said, what Tinder understood is you always want to get that high of that first meeting.
Yes.
When you first meet that person and your gut and your body is like shivering, and you're
and some of us are actually addicted to this.
That feeling is addictive.
Yeah.
But what you don't understand is that what your body's telling you is, whatever you're seeing and whatever you are actually looking at and you're talking to has the capacity to bring to you security, reproduction, and a process to move forward. Does it make sense?
Mhm.
Because the reason, and shifting the conversation a little bit to the sex part of it, the reason we look at sex and we're so attracted to sex because as biological beings we want to reproduce. Sex is the way we reproduce. We move on our DNA. We keep going as a family. We keep going as a species.
It allows for procreation.
And allows procreation. So whenever you see a person or you find when you're your child or your family, that's all of it a process of moving forward. Okay, so with sex, one of the reasons it's important for your health is because the ability to keep yourself as a reproductive individual keeps you on your toes. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because one of the conversations I always have with our team and even my wife, I always talk about why is it that when people get married, a lot of times they let themselves go. It's almost like
they get into that comfort zone. And
I don't know if I'm the only one that notices that.
And I think, and I always say, whatever it took to get him or her, that's what you got to maintain to keep them. You know what I mean? Because you have to keep that person stimulated. I think we fall into this place where we forget what it was. What was that thing that caught us about that person? And then we get to where, okay, we're just going on with everyday life.
Exactly. But and now when you think about it from that perspective, it's like, okay, you were super healthy, you kept yourself good, now you met, now you reproduce. So it's like, okay, I no longer have to seek that. But it is so important for you to keep yourself still as a reproductive individual because that's going to keep you healthy. It's going to keep you that love and that spark is going to continue. I mean, if you see couples that stay healthy, they continue to be healthy after their marriage. Their sex life, their love life is always on. It's on the go. It's powerful. But when you start to let yourself go and you start to forget how you guys met, what was the principles of that relationship, then essentially you just kind of become self-sabotaging and you start getting unhealthy.
Life in general, just in everything inside our body, it's all about balance. If we have one hormone or one chemical messenger that's off, it throws us off. So now let's look at the surface. Sex, love, beauty, health. You're with someone. It's all about balance. You have to be able to balance everything out because that's what's going to keep your relationship. I think that's what's going to keep your relationship healthy. It's going to keep it strong. It's going to keep you communicating. Because the minute you start looking at each other and you're like, oh, wow, I don't like what I'm seeing, you start to develop what they call resentment.
Yes. And even let's just get practical. As you start getting a little bit older and then you don't function sexually, let's say as a male, you no longer get erections, you no longer can perform, you no longer have the appetite, then you put yourself in a detrimental situation. But what's happening now is instead of understanding that as a chemical being, a biological being, you have to correct yourself. You have to get yourself healthy so that part of the body works good. You go to a doctor and you say, oh, I have erectile dysfunction. He gives you some Viagra and you think you're fixing the problem.
No, you only see that's just a temporary fix.
That's a temporary fix. But that is the thing that this is what we want to communicate to you guys. Whenever you have something in your life that should be working optimally, and of course we're going to age and there's going to become a point where it's just not going to happen. But for a lot of people, it's happening too soon. As a matter of fact, I just saw a study that said for 30 years, for individuals that are 30-year-old and younger, our sperm count, and I say because of the age, our sperm count has dropped almost 50%. So infertility is actually increasing. I mean, I know part of it is socially, millennials are having less kids, but also another part of it is we are so unhealthy that we are not producing enough healthy sperm. And a lot of couples that are trying to actually conceive
are having difficulty. That's where we have more infertility than ever, I think. And while you're saying that, I heard this great podcast with a bunch of doctors and where they were talking about the stressors, the extrinsic factors that we face today cause a lot of neuroinflammation. This neuroinflammation, again, I said the body's about messengers, chemical messengers, right? So remember, in that brain, you also have hormones that are produced there, brain hormones. Now, if those brain hormones are affected, So what else gets affected? The sex hormones. What else gets affected? Your your immune system, your metabolism, how your skin looks, how you feel. So I give you Viagra. I'm just fixing that problem that you have with erectile dysfunction. But so you end up going to have sex with somebody. Does it make you feel the way you should feel, or is it just the function of it, the functionality of it? That's the question.
Yes, and like what you're mentioning, when you go to see a doctor, because of course you say, look, I want to be able to function. Give me some Viagra. But I'm not taking care of the root problem.
Right. I think the question should be why? What is going
Exactly.
on? Is it something in the environment? Is it something you're taking? Is it something in our pathways? Because know that our bodies love pathways. Our body loves roadmaps and blueprint. So there are these pathways. So is there a dysfunction in the pathway? If I hit only one part of that pathway, I still have weakness in the pathway. So that one part is only going to be good for just a short period of time. And we're going to be back where we started.
And not only that, I mean, one of the simplest ways that you can put down your sex life is obesity.
Correct.
Because most of your sex binding hormones get stuck in fat, and your fat won't release it.
Yes.
And you just basically don't have the sex hormones that are necessary.
All hormones.
Or
So
hormones,
you
right?
always have to think when you're trying to correct or trying to improve your life. The first place I would say start with those little hanging fruit, the basics. So those basics we talked about: sleep, obesity being another, stress management, movement, you know what I mean? Connections, and then the foods that we put in our bodies. So all of these things all relate to sex, love, and beauty.
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing that we're saying in this podcast, guys, so we get the full picture, is sex is really, really important for the longevity and the meaningfulness of our lives. We're meant to have sex. Sex is crucial, and we're fucking it up. I'm sorry to say that word. We're messing it up. But because we're not understanding that sex is so important, that staying healthy is important for that part of our life. So,
I think another thing you can put it is sex, love, and beauty. They need cofactors. They have cofactors. They have to have those precursors, and those precursors, what you're talking about.
Yes. So, I guess part of the message for you guys here is let's look at sex a little bit different. Let's stop looking at sex as just a pleasure thing. Let's
Or
look at
just
it
a
as an
function.
expression of a healthy body. When your body's healthy, it can have sex anytime it wants. It can procreate when it wants. It can be available to mate. This is why women tend to be attracted to men that look more fit, because when they look more fit, it seems like, wow, this guy is prepared to mate. This guy is able to
that
reproduce.
woman, it translates security. It translates comfort. It translates strength. That's what it translates. For women, that's very important to us.
Absolutely. When you see muscle, you probably in your chemistry, in your biology, you're saying, "Wow, this guy can hunt. This guy can, reproduce. This guy can pick me up or whatever." So look how important this is, and this is why women like the guy of the gym. This is why you guys like Rambo. This is why you guys like the fit guys. It is not because it is not just an attraction, a psychological attraction. There is a biological attraction that you're wired for. Why is it that there's so many studies that show that women are more attracted to why is it that men that show pictures of their cars and their boats and of their money are more attractive, are perceived as more attractive? It's because, like you just said, it signals security, and we need security to move forward. Does it make sense?
Exactly.
So I think what me and Alex in forward thinking always try to translate to our clients is, let's look at sex a little bit different. Let's take the psychological part of sex out the way, and let's look at it from a physiological, chemical, and biological. And you're going to start to respect it even more.
I think let's try to be, a lot of times it's just an act. You know what I mean? You're just there. And it's just something that you're doing or to please someone else. Sometimes you have to kind of like put yourself in it, make it more like it is for you just as much as it's for somebody else. So you have to feel good about yourself to be able to do that, to be part of this experience, because through that experience is where you're going to generate those connections that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Just being there, you're not generating anything. You're not releasing those type of powerful hormones that we were talking about in the beginning.
Absolutely. I mean, you're actually probably if you're not healthy, causing a little bit of damage, right? Because
Exactly.
if you're unhealthy and you're trying to do things you shouldn't be doing, and then you hurt your back, then it's no good. So guys,
The main point I think, guys, is
so I
like it
think
all starts with
sex
you.
health has become really important, right?
Mhm.
And especially the fact that we're overstimulated. Because here's the other thing that's crazy: a lot, it's becoming even easier to get the stimulation of sex. This is why. What do you think is the number one thing people watch on the internet?
Porn.
Porn. Why do you think? Why do you think
Because you
porn
don't
becomes so addictive?
because you don't have to give anything back. It's just you. It's pleasuring you. There's no that interaction that happens.
You
It's
don't,
just
you
a
skip a lot of steps.
yeah.
But now, what incentive would I have to get healthier, to be able to reproduce, if I can just access the same pleasure in the short term in a computer, in a phone, and is right available, right? So
Exactly.
I don't have to work as hard
Exactly.
to get you to like me, because I have porn right next to me that gives me the same,
Eh,
not the same pleasure, let's be honest, but it gives me that sense of pleasure. But then what do we know with people that start watching porn? In the long run, they get very addicted, it becomes overstimulated, and then there's a huge issue.
Yeah, because then they live this unrealistic life.
They
They
no longer
these
have to get healthy.
they wire their wiring gets what do we say? Dewired. I
They
can't
get
say that.
overstimulated. The dopamine production doesn't go there. They actually created no bonding through that process. They actually didn't create any meaningful relationship, and it is just a pleasure being processed. But what happens essentially is there's no incentive for me to get healthier.
And over
Now imagine if I don't have any pornography, any computers, or any phone. Imagine we were 100 years ago, and I'm trying to find a mate. And I understand that I need to look healthier. I need to look better. Would I make the sacrifice to do that? I mean,
yes.
that's why we have gyms. Again, a lot of people go to the gym to be healthy, but remember, a lot of people also go to the gym to send signals to the world. I am a healthy person. I am capable of reproducing. I am bringing you security. So that means I am a high standard mate. And if you don't believe me that is true, I want you to do the following. You go into an Instagram account and you look at Elon Musk account, which is the founder and CEO of two of the most important companies in the United States, SpaceX and Tesla. He has less followers than the 500,000 fitness models that are showing their bodies all day on Instagram. And if that is not a divergence of how humanity thinks and how our biology is triggered, then you tell me what it is. Because when
Exactly.
the guy that's changing the world has less followers to a girl from Montana that's showing you her body, and that's all literally she does all day, then
And we
that's how
find
you know.
much more substance in that.
We find more substance, more play. So people are driven by that pleasure. But what you have to do, what we have to try to do, Alex, I believe, is to outsmart that pleasure, right? And understand it. So sex was a way for us to reproduce. If we stay healthy, our sex health will be, our bodies will be able to have good sex, be able to have the balanced hormones, and hopefully share that through meaningful
Right.
relationships.
Health translates into beauty. It translates into great symmetry. It translates into love, and it translates into great sex. And that's the
Absolutely.
bottom line. You
Let me
can't
ask you a
have one
question.
without the other.
Why are men more attracted to women with bigger bigger boobs and bigger waist? I mean, smaller waist and bigger butt.
Because of Venus, the goddess. I
So there's a book by Gatsan. He explains that.
don't.
Basically, women with bigger boobs signal that they can
Mm-hmm.
procreate. They
That's
have more
true.
estrogen.
That's
They can
true.
produce more milk for the
For the
baby.
babies.
So
That's
guys are
true.
we see those, we
Wider
see
hips
women
means
with
more
big boobs and
children.
we, oh my god, this, it's a biological thing. We think
Mhm.
she can reproduce more. The hips, when bigger hips means you can hold your baby healthy.
You can have more children.
You can have more children. So you don't know that, but it's wired into you to see that. So why is it that women go and get plastic surgery to get bigger boobs, smaller waist, and bigger butt?
Yeah, and it's been there, and it's
Come
interesting
on.
because that type of figure has been there since the beginning of time. If we go back and look at paintings from way Greek, the Greek gods, and we look at paintings from long ago, women were very voluptuous. So
But
it's
it wasn't manipulated though.
no, it wasn't.
It
That's the
wasn't.
thing. So which means it's do we say that it's wired, it's innate in us, so we were born with this type of thinking?
I would say yes. I would say I mean,
But then I have to take that back because there was
okay,
this period
let's
of
have a good
time.
discussion. Go ahead.
I have to take that back because there was a period of time where what we're being shown was these very skinny toothpick models. So we had a lot of girls who then had eating disorders.
I agree.
You know what I mean? So is it innate or is it something that we're programmed?
So here's what I think, right? If we look at it from a biological evolutionary point of view, when you see a woman that has bigger boobs and a bigger butt and a small waist, it means she's ready to procreate. She's ready to have, sex, but she still has not sort of crossed over her best time, right?